Welcome, Gareth. Tell me about yourself.
Yeah, hi. I say from one coach to the other, I would say, what do you want to know?
I want to know how you got started in assertiveness.
And that's um, that's an interesting story, really. So, well, in terms of my background, I was sort of leadership professional in retail hospitality, and then when I had a big life transition, moved to Brussels from the UK, realised that retail for me wasn't quite what I wanted anymore. But still loved working with people. So then I started looking to coaching as a career. Again, working with people has always been something that's comes very natural to me. I'm an extrovert at heart. So I started to train as a coach, and I'm now an associate certified coach with the ICF. And then as I had more and more clients coming to me over the times, you start to pick up on themes. Again, the commercial person in me was sort of, hearing and listening to what their sort of topics were, which were very much around boundary setting, being able to say no, being able to speak up at work and express their opinion. And these thematics came back again and again. So then what came from that then was, well, there's a need here in the market for someone who can specialize in assertiveness, who can support people to, again, find their voice, find their self-expression, communicate it in a way that doesn't unduly impact others. And so, and that's where it kind of came from. And now there's a workshop, there's a book in the making. Maybe one day they'll make a film about me. I don't know. I don't know the last bit. I've got a face for radio, but
Face for a podcast.
face for a podcast, exactly. And that's it really. And now, in addition to sort of focusing or having my niche in assertiveness, I also train up and coming coaches to the market. So at an accredited school in Belgium. So yeah.
Okay. What actually is assertiveness?
That's a good question. It has evolved, you know. If you look back over the last sort of 100 years or so, it kind of started out very much as like a skills-based kind of approach around how to speak in a certain way, how to communicate your needs in a certain sort of, call it like a fixed manner. For me, what I've noticed in more recent times is again, assertiveness has been sort of characterized as this ability to, sort of stand tall, stand proud, raise your voice, enunciate, and all these. I mean, these are elements that kind of, yes, can contribute to a form of assertive communication. However, for me, what assertiveness is about being able to sort of express yourself, be direct, be firm, be positive. But it's where that comes from, which is almost like a sense of inner alignment. That there's no one way to be assertive. In fact, for me, it's inauthentic if you try to be something you're not. Quite simply. So for me, in my work and what I do is working with people, supporting people to sort of, again, find their inner voice, to understand what's important to them, to remove sort of some of the sort of beliefs they may have built up about themselves over the years, to tap into their sort of inner resources to really understand who they are. And then through that, they can then start to express themselves in a way that's very natural to them, that also gives them gravitas, that allows their, not just their voice, their opinions and their feelings to be heard. So, yeah.
So it's a mixture of how other people perceive you, and it's a mixture of how you perceive yourself. Does that sound fair?
Assertiveness is always situational. It is always situational. So when I say that, it's that, yes, it's a two-way thing. So you will be communicating your message, at the same time you have to be mindful of the audience and who is receiving that. You can't just you can't run roughshod over everyone just because you're entitled to express your opinion, to share with it how you feel about the situation. but again, you also have to take into account your audience. It's one of my what I call rules of the game, which I sort of cover in my course.
Yeah. Tell me a bit more about this idea that it's situational and that you need to take the audience into account.
Well, for example, when you're how can I best describe this? Is that when you I think when I think of assertiveness, sometimes there's this almost like negative connotation of it almost being aggression, and you have that image of the sort of the pointing finger. But when you're pointing the finger, there's three fingers coming back at yourself. So it's just that element of self-reflection. You know, yes, you're speaking to somebody, but remember the other three fingers are pointing at you. So it's you do have to take into account your own emotions, your own expression, to make sure that lands coherently, that it doesn't unduly impact on other people. There is a right to self-expression, but it's not to the point of aggression.
So this is perhaps very different to maybe what some of us in healthcare are used to, where we're always used to, there's always somebody who talks very loud and all over everybody else, and is very strong in giving their opinions. Sometimes that's me, Gareth, believe it or not. Sort of, but it sounds like that's not what you're describing.
Well, again, but when we look at the situation there, I would say again, it would depend. My understanding of healthcare is very limited, so I'll just put that there now. However, I can imagine, like almost like in any profession, you have moments and times where actually there are moments where how can I put it, where assertiveness might spill over into aggression, as such, or could be perceived that way. But sometimes the situation will warrant a very strong, authoritative voice. For example, in times of emergency, or when the delivery arrives late and everyone's in my profession and you're trying to mobilize 40, 50 people all at once. Again, it's how you do it. It's how to create that sense of urgency. For example, in that situation, how to mobilize people, but at the same time, again, it doesn't mean you shout at them. It's how do you take into account, actually, because they've all got their lives on the go. Maybe what's your priority isn't necessarily theirs. So it really is an art to working with people and sort of landing your message.
Mm-hmm. I might pick that up a little bit. I'm gonna move on to maybe sort of lack of assertiveness, whatever that is, in a minute, because that's probably much more common. But actually, sort of we do have an issue, because there are often urgent situations or emergencies that do require healthcare professionals to speak up and be quite authoritative. So, I mean, what would be your tips about how does one do that in a way that lands well and constructively, rather than in a way that lands in a kind of, very aggressive or very dictatorial fashion?
Yeah. I mean, for me, one of the things that I've always adopted throughout my career is this approach of what I call, and again, it's something I convey in my courses, is what I call a four-part message, which is, and this can be done very succinctly on the spot, but it's where you convey the situation that's happening, how you feel about it, the effect it's having, and what you want that person to do differently. And it does sound quite quite a big paragraph as such, or a soliloquy, but really it's just a case of stop doing that. It's making me feel X. The effect is it's preventing me from achieving whatever it might be. I would ask you to do it differently going forward. So there's a sort of polite request. But again, it's focused on you as the individual. You're taking accountability for your feelings. And I think that's one of the linchpins to assertiveness, is that it is about you, not about the other person.
So maybe an example then might be, I'm worried that this child is going to die. I'm actually sort of really stressed about that, because the stakes are high, and I need you urgently to go and do or get X, Y, and Z. And actually, as you say, that's really quite quick, isn't it?
And it also, and again, when it comes back to a bigger piece around kind of, even on the spot, like change management. How do you communicate the why? You're telling people, that's the important bit, really. Is if you just said, go get whatever it is you want them to get, for the sake of those extra, I think 3 or 4 seconds, again, I'm not a healthcare professional. I would question whether that's the difference between life and death. Maybe sometimes it is, but it's not maybe in the operating theatre where there's different times and occasions where you would adapt your tone, adapt your approach, volume, even the content. Sometimes the quick yes, no, grab this, grab that. We all do it, but it's more so in the everyday in terms of creating a work culture that is sort of inclusive, friendly, productive, and engaged. This is where I'm sort of focusing is more around is those elements, in the sort of the everyday rather than the sort of the more acute situations.
Yeah. And in actual fact, the acute situations, they don't just come out of the blue. There's often a preamble, and then maybe in the preamble, then one can communicate the urgency, the worry, the importance, the why. And then, when you do actually need something urgently, then all of those things have already been communicated. Yeah. So I like that. Yeah. I think so I think that that is an issue in healthcare, but often it's sort of we get people that that either they themselves say they struggle with assertiveness, or other people say this person struggles with assertiveness.
Yeah.
So I'm interested. Can you tell me a bit more about what exactly is lack of assertiveness?
When we say lack of assertiveness, for me the word is passive. It's there's passive, and there's also you can also have a lack of assertiveness in the sense as well that you are the other extreme, which is where you have such a lack of self-awareness, in fact, that you're so aggressive. Assertiveness is kind of the sweet spot, as I describe it. Or if you imagine a seesaw, you've got passive on the one end and aggressive on the other, and assertiveness sits right in the middle. If it's achieving that balance across sort of the behaviors and across the approach to land your message. In terms of so again, passive individuals tend to generally not express their needs. They don't tend to share with what's important to them, or communicate how they feel, for fear of, again, fear comes up a lot again, but it's around for fear of sort of being rejected, or for fear of being thought stupid. Sometimes there's many different reasons. They're mostly fear-based, which drives the kind of that sort of passive nature.
How do people end up like that?
Do you know what? I couldn't give you an answer to that, in the sense that every single person has their own unique story and own. In the sense that from the day we're born, pretty much from the moment every single moment since we arrive, we're having impressions thrown around us from our parents, grandparents, schools, friends, colleagues. All these things will create and reinforce beliefs about ourselves, how we see ourselves in the world, and that's what really contributes to then, again, sort of this our identity. And this is kind of, again, this is where what we're working with is actually with the identity of people at the end of the day, and that's kind of how this either lack of assertiveness, or lack of passivity, or lack of assertiveness, or aggressiveness can form. And that's sort of my job then, is to, when people identify that need, that they want to communicate in a different manner, or even it's more than communication, in fact, just be in a different manner. That's where sort of I then sort of get involved, and we sort of strip back some of the layers to understand sort of what's going on there, what beliefs have they picked up over the years that are no longer serving them, and again, and understanding how it, again, through doing that, they start to explore and understand how they feel about, how it feels to them to express themselves. Initially, it's in very safe scenarios, very safe situations, like in a coaching session or a training session. And like I said, and then piece by piece, then it's confidence building. People then take step by step to, sort of find their voice and start to engage the wider world.
And how do people know where they are on this aggressive versus passive, or the assertiveness sweet spot?
Do you know what? A lot of time, I don't think people do know necessarily. It's in fact, when a lot of people arrive, it's this place of sort of not knowing. they don't know what it is that they necessarily want. Sometimes it feeds into, because someone who is assertive, for example, is very much in like I said, aligned in terms of what's important to them and what they want and what they need from others and from themselves. So it's more actually a place of, yeah, this sort of not knowing space that people arrive. And again, it can come from, like I said, from any other angle or space around assertiveness. And I suppose what I do is quietly welcome them in to the circle, just again, step by step. And that's the joy of the work. Some people take a lot of steps. Some people can jump straight in. Depends on the individual, depends on that whole beautiful life experience they've had before that will undoubtedly inform kind of who they are.
And I guess arriving in uncertainty, if I think when all of us as healthcare professionals, if we think, well, I'm not really quite sure how I am or who I am or what impact I have on others, and I want to spend some time thinking about it, I mean, that's quite a good place to be, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. I mean, a place of not knowing is a place of curiosity. You know, it's very childlike in that sense. I mean, I miss my childhood. I don't know about you, but it was definitely a joyous time. So yeah, I think there's a genuine fear sometimes. People don't enjoy not knowing. There's that, you know, they want to be in control. They like to have some sort of sense of where they're going, but more often than not, on the journey, when people then accept the fact that actually I don't know, that's where then this is kind of one of the turning points where then they start to really find out who they are, really find out what it is they want, and again, and then within that, how they want to express that.
I think the not knowing, I can see that also translates into clinical practice, because one of the things I've noticed is as I've gotten older and more experienced, I'm much more likely to say I have no idea than perhaps I was early on in my career when constantly I felt that I did have to have all the answers, and if I didn't, I was somehow a failure. You mentioned earlier that
Failure there.
yeah, failure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that in order to change that, it's about identity. It's about how people see themselves. I'm interested, how do people change how they see themselves?
I mean, I should put a caveat here. Not everyone will do. I mean, again, in terms of the journey people go on, some people will potentially sort of reach that level of exploration. Some people say actually, and again, I don't sort of force my my agenda on people, but some people will just be actually happy or content. Their aim is to actually get some sort of what we call assertiveness skills, more so like sort of what I call it the sort of entryway into assertiveness. Again, it will depend on the individual, but really that's how they arrive there. It's when they start to what I call like deep dive and explore again, sort of what is important to them right now. Because we're not, you know, we all evolve. We're not the same people we were 20 years ago or 10 years ago, maybe even 10 months ago for some people. So it's very much around, working with, again, this sort of sense of discovery and exploration, not knowing sort of what it is that it's important to them in life, not knowing when they arrive around, how can I put it, or not knowing there's another way to see the world sometimes, It depends on, I mean, we can really have, it depends on our exposure to the wider world, but we can really build up some very strong viewpoints about ourselves and about other people around us. And it's just, again, I say this in my course, it's just a truth, it's not the truth, and that's one of the beauties of when you go into sort of a personal development course like this, or when you work with a coach, is that it's that other perspective, is what we call that mirror, someone to hold up and say, actually, well, what are you seeing right now? And if I hold it here from this other angle, what do you see there? It really is about, again, driving and bringing about this sense of, or an increased sense of self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And through that's then how people arrive, because again, they see themselves from many different angles, many different positions over a course of time, and then that's then where they will or won't decide to, call it change, or maybe they might even do it unconsciously sometimes, you know.
Yeah, I like how you talk about assertiveness coming from the inside, and how you see yourself, the relationship you have with yourself, and all of the stuff that people read about, sort of standing tall and and using a loud voice. That's superficial stuff, which may or may not work for some people, but even if it does work, it's kind of it's superficial behavior. Whereas what you're saying is what really needs to happen is there needs to be a healthy relationship with yourself and an understanding of how you impact other people, and that's where high quality assertiveness rather than aggression or passive behavior then sits.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I give myself as an example here, so I'm what continental 193, 6'2" in UK measurements. I'm quite a big guy. So for me, if I was then stand up, sort of, as we said, this kind of tall, shoulders back approach is probably quite intimidating for some people. So invariably, I'll find myself in most forms of communication actually lowering myself in some respect, whether it's leaning on a table. These things that, again, they're not free thought. They sort of happen naturally, and I notice myself doing it. But yeah, this thing. So if likewise, that said, if somebody is of a different stature to me, then maybe for them standing up tall and shoulders back will be an alignment with who they are. But I know for me, in terms of who I am and what's important to me, is that I would never want to intimidate somebody. In fact, I want somebody to. I'm very much about building trust and creating a sense of safety with whoever I work with, whether it's as a coach now or in my previous career as in leadership. So yeah, I think it's this notion of one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's where my kind of that's my point of difference, I suppose. Although it's there are a lot of courses out there on the market that say otherwise, but for me, it's it's important that we work with again the head, the heart, and the body. It's all got to come together for an authentic, assertive expression.
Mm-hmm. If I think of our medical students or very early career doctors, what can senior doctors do to help develop assertiveness in people that are at the beginning of their career journey?
As soon as you asked me that question, I just thought the word is, well, two words, same letters, listen and silent. So just listening for me is you can be the quietest person in the room and be completely assertive. It's how do you, again, if and I mean that as the sort of the senior doctors, but likewise also for the juniors coming through. It's not about making your voice heard or being the loudest or the proudest. But it's about this element of congruence and just being present, I suppose, actually in the room as well. It's this notion so that actually, like you said earlier on, so that you can be fearless rather than fearful, that you can. I always love the term when I talk about vulnerability and strength. For me, they're so closely aligned. That you can be vulnerable and say, I don't know, I'm not sure what's going on, and that comes about though through this concept of safety that's that is generated. That requires assertiveness. Because assertiveness in its truest sense, I said it requires great listening skills, and not just listening to the sort of the words, but it's actually when somebody walks into work or they walk into the meeting and taking into account their whole presence, their whole body. How are they? I mean, I'm aware I've had a lot of friends over the years who've worked in the NHS, and I've seen the toll it takes on them. And but they would never complain. But physically, when I think back now to how they would show up to a after work drink, always later than the rest of us. So I think that's really it. Be aware, listen, be silent, invites them into the room almost,
Mm-hmm.
and lead by example. That's the thing. We model as Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Model what it is to be assertive, not aggressive.
You use the phrase that people being present What do you mean by being present, or what is that, and what does that look like, and how do you get there?
Now we're touching on my other favorite topic. So, being present is, I mean, it's more than just being there, if that makes sense. It's, you can be in a room, talking to someone and be completely unpresent, or, so presence for me is about, again, it speaks to this notion of alignment, but it speaks to the partnership or the relationship that's actually happening at that time. So, at least in my world, two people both need to really be present for it to exist, So presence is about, again, it's about listening, about giving space, creating time to the other person. If I was to put it in a sentence to be more clear, I would say it's about sort of it's about speaking, but not, how can I say, or when you're listening, you're listening to the other person, not just to come back with something else to say, so you're actually taking in the whole of the person. You're again, it's this notion of really hearing everything about them, from not just what they're saying, how they're saying it, what their body is saying when they're saying it, just really giving full attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose that's the easiest way to say presence. I mean, technically, there's a lot more elements I could sort of drill down into around what makes certain executives more present, or what makes coaches more present. But for me, that's it. Really, it's about the intention of giving your attention to somebody else.
Mhm. Yeah. I have a vision of people in meetings signing their letters, or online meetings, and people are dealing with their emails, or people are on their phones. But they're all the kind of things that happen all the time, and they sound like they're exactly the opposite of what your suggestion would be a better way of being.
It is, but I mean, I think I was reading recently about Novak Djokovic, and he was sort of saying in his, 23, 24 Grand Slams, how actually it's not about being constantly present, because his argument is it's kind of an impossible state. You can't be constantly in the game, out of your head and into your body all the time. But what he does touch upon is that it's actually how you come back. So yes, we all will grab the phone, send an email when we should be listening to what the other person's saying. We're human, but it's that moment when you catch yourself and you say, yeah, I wasn't listening, right, come back to the room. And that's really, for me, how that's one element to how we start to sort of build our presence more and more, is again, it comes back to self-awareness, being aware of what you're doing and who you are in that moment, and aware that, again, you're not giving yourself fully to the other person or persons in the room.
Mhm. And then my final question, when it comes to assertiveness, what would be your top tips for doctors at work?
So I've already shared for me, I mean, if you're trying to create a culture of assertiveness, and for want of a better word, for one of almost like fearlessness, where people's voices can be heard and where people can be expressed, it all begins with listening. Like I said, giving time, giving space to other voices. The other tips that I would say is very much around knowing yourself, starting to actually look inwards, actually, to what's important to you. So, and to understand, just start to understand yourself more, because the more you understand yourself, then the more aligned you'll become to what's important to you, and what you hold to be true. You'll create this sense of sort of inner congruence, that then when you do speak, when you do express your messages, they're very authentic. And authenticity as well is key to being assertive. In fact, when somebody is 100% authentic, I can pretty much probably guarantee that in that room, they will also be probably the most assertive person, because people will gravitate towards them. People will be interested because that person is interested in what they're actually saying. They're not saying what they think they should say. There's no sort of an ego in the background trying to project this kind of image of a certain type of doctor or a certain type of surgeon, or so it's very much be authentic, know yourself. But we're using some lovely quotes. So Gandhi and now know thyself. Is that Plato? Is that? I don't know where this is coming from. Your podcast is bringing out some of my things I didn't know I had in my brain. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Gareth.